Hello everyone and welcome back to Mach 1 Mindsets. Today we're diving into AP US Government and Politics 1.4 Challenges of the Articles of Confederation. Now before we get started, please make sure you like, subscribe, and of course comment down below if you have any questions. Let's dive into it. The Articles of Confederation, adopted in 1777 and ratified in 1781, were America's first attempt at a national government. They were written during the Revolutionary War when the primary fear was tyranny. The colonists had just escaped British rule, so they intentionally created a weak central government and gave most of the power to the states. That decision made sense at the time, but in practice it failed. The Articles created a system that could not govern a nation. The federal government lacked the authority to tax, regulate trade, enforce laws, and respond to crises. These weaknesses led to economic instability, political disorder, and fear of anarchy. Let's break down the core challenges. First, Congress had no power to tax. Under the Articles, Congress could request money from the states, but it could not force them to pay. Many states refused. As a result, the national government was constantly broke. It could not pay debts from the Revolutionary War, fund basic operations, or even support a military. Why this matters is very simple. A government without revenue cannot function. It cannot defend itself, enforce laws, or maintain credibility at home or abroad. Second, there was no executive branch. There was no president and no national leader responsible for enforcing laws. Congress could pass legislation, but there was no mechanism to carry it out. States routinely ignored national laws and treaties with foreign nations. Laws without enforcement are meaningless. This flaw turned the federal government into a suggestion box rather than an authority. Third, the Articles created no national court system. There was no federal judiciary to interpret laws or to resolve disputes between the states. If states disagreed over borders, trade, or legal interpretations, there was no neutral authority to decide the issue. This lack of judicial power led to the inconsistent laws and growing tension between the states, further weakening national unity. Fourth, Congress could not regulate interstate commerce. States taxed goods from other states, issued their own currencies, and enforced conflicting trade rules. This fragmented the economy. Trade became inefficient, expensive, and very chaotic. Instead of operating as one nation, the United States functioned like 13 competing countries. Fifth, the amendment process was nearly impossible. Any changes to the Articles required unanimous approval from all 13 states. This meant that one state could block reform, even when the system was clearly failing. As problems grew, solutions were impossible to implement. All of these weaknesses came into focus during Shays' Rebellion. In 1786 and 1787, Massachusetts farmers, many of them Revolutionary War veterans, revolted over high taxes, debt, and economic hardship. Led by Daniel Shays, the rebellion exposed a fatal flaw in the Articles. Congress had no standing army and no power to raise one. It could not respond. The rebellion was eventually crushed by a state militia, not the national government. This terrified the national leaders. If the federal government could not suppress an internal uprising, how could it protect the nation from foreign threats or internal collapse? Shays' Rebellion convinced many Americans that liberty without order leads to chaos. By 1787, leaders like George Washington, James Madison, and Alexander Hamilton agreed that the Articles were beyond repair. They called for the Constitutional Convention, originally intended to revise the Articles, but ultimately used to replace them entirely. The U.S. Constitution solved the major failures of the Articles by creating a stronger central government, the power to tax and regulate commerce, an executive branch to enforce laws, a national judiciary to interpret laws, a flexible amendment process, and a balanced system of federalism. In short, the Articles of Confederation failed because they prioritized state sovereignty over national survival. They taught the founders a critical lesson. A government must be strong enough to govern, or it will collapse under its own weaknesses. That lesson became the foundation of the United States Constitution.